Good afternoon. This is Ken Gosnell with CEO Experience. And today at our CEO conversation, we're hosting Barry Wolfe, a human resource expert and the author of the book, The Little Black Book of Human Resources. Barry has helped companies and organizations think through their HR processes and really how to use their most valuable asset, which is their people. I've often taught the principle that to improve an organization, we have to improve our team. And so I'm delighted and excited to welcome Barry Wolfe today to our CEO conversation. Welcome, Barry.
Thanks, Ken. Great to be here.
Well,
Really excited.
Thank you for spending some time with us. So I love your book, The Little Black Book of Human Resource Management. And you write in such a fantastic way that it brings everybody in, even if human resources isn't necessarily maybe something that they enjoy. Can you tell just a little bit about why you wrote the book and what somebody might be able to pick up as they look at your little black book of human resource management?
Sure. Thanks, Ken. It's been out since about 2015, I guess, and just recently became a bestseller. And I started to write it. I got the idea for it actually, I don't know, about a few years before that, when I just started to realize, as I was networking with different HR people, that over the years I just was kind of learning a lot of things. I like to think of it as a result as kind of scraped knuckles and attaboys that I started to find were valuable to different people in the HR field. And I had thought this would make it might make a fun book. And I'd written two others, neither of which are ever going to see the light of day, so I won't, don't worry about that. But so I'd started another job and I'd moved, and so I was kind of waiting for my family to show up. So I found myself in my evenings with more time than I, had normally. And so I thought, this is probably the best chance to get this done. So that's how it came to be. And a local publisher in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from, has published the books called The Expressive Press. And so that's how it came to be. And it's interesting you say your point, Ken, because I have been really surprised about how much feedback I've received and reactions from people who have bought the book and read it, who are not HR people, like you're saying. I mean, it's just a lot of people in management that decided to pick it up and had nice things to say about it and share with me things about how helpful they found it in various aspects of their job. So yeah, it's nice to know that it's not just HR people that are finding the content worthwhile.
Right, and I still like the old book method, so I still have a library of books, but I do have a Kindle as well. And I was just mentioning Barry's book is on discount at the moment on Amazon. If you want a Kindle version, you can get a discounted version just for I think it's $2.99. And so I do encourage it as a resource right now. What a great reading, and Barry comes at it from a very funny methodology, so it's an easy read. Hey, one of the questions, Barry, that I really am interested in is, especially during this difficult moment when so many companies are having to deal with their employees and trying to figure out payroll and payroll issues, what would you recommend to a company right now, and how do they deal with their people and do HR effectively? And then tied to that, what is the biggest mistake that you often see leaders make where it comes to HR and HR processes in an organization?
Wow. Well, first of all, I think that we should go back to look at one of the tools that more modern HR technology has provided us in terms of intranets and the ability or web-based solutions or phone apps, for example, that have made opportunities for just touching employees so much easier to take advantage of than probably ever before. Company newsletters are great, but if you're going to flip through 7 or 8 pages, I don't know how much anybody's really going to take out of that. But one of the things I love about so much HR technology today through company intranets, for example, is the ability to just simply ping people, with little things. And I think especially in this day and age, as people are feeling, everybody's feeling isolated generally, and that goes for people that are, still working from home. And I think that companies employers should be doubling down really on those efforts to just figure out ways to communicate with people, just to say good job, to say thanks, to let them know how much they appreciate the efforts. Making sure that employees know that the channels back into the organization for questions or concerns are still there. Just keeping that. It doesn't have to be dissertations on these kinds of things, but a couple of sentences every day or so on these kinds of topics, I think are just really, really important and easier than ever before. Like I say, and it's tools that a lot of organizations have already had, but I just think so critical to go back and double down on that these days. So
I think that's fantastic. I talk about the voice of the leader and how important that is. I think a lot of HR problems happen in companies, and really it's relationship problems happen when we don't communicate or we don't communicate clearly.
yeah,
And, in times of crisis, and whether it's for an individual company or whether it's for multiple companies, like in this situation, people can respond and handle a lot of difficult moments or even difficult conversations when we communicate with them. It's
yeah.
often when we don't communicate that people begin to create their own narrative or a story, or they make decisions. Do you find that to be the case, that
Oh,
miscommunication?
absolutely, absolutely. So many times the you know you talk about the biggest mistake I think a lot of companies make. I have to say, I've dealt with, I don't know how many employee issues over the years, various kinds of problem children and so forth. Um, but I will tell you that the people that drive me the craziest or have, in a senior HR role, is really in proportion to the higher up the ladder you go, and the people that are kind of supposed to know better in a lot of ways. And so much of it is back to exactly what you're saying, Ken, in terms of not being clear with people, where the lines are, that you're here, looking to reinforce the good work and calling out, where it's not going so well. Um, and these aren't necessarily, again, things that require like a dissertation. It's just paying attention. It's kind of that, what Ken Blanchard talked about some years ago in terms of a 1-minute management sort of approach. Look, you don't have to agonize about it. Just, again, like in these day and age, I mentioned the using the intranet, but hey, a phone works really well too. Just 90 seconds. How you doing? Everything okay? Anything you need? Hey, really appreciate you sticking with us here through all this stuff. Call if you need anything. Any questions about anything? What can I get for you? And then you're on to the next person. And I think too often we make these things, we make these kind of challenges really a lot more complicated than they have to be. And and these kind of touches are just huge. One of the things I will tell you, when I had an HR day job, I always made a point of doing a lot of exit interviews, and I've probably done more than any 3 people I know, probably. But I think it's very important to hear, from all levels of the business. If someone's leaving, really, what caused this? And people talk about, well, I got a better opportunity. Yeah, okay, well, you got an opportunity, but why was that the better one? Why, when you got that opportunity, why didn't you say, no, I'm sticking where I'm at? And I will tell you, there's an adage in human resources. If you haven't heard this, write it down, because this is one of the truest things. A lot of research has said this, and I can tell you, I've heard it over the years from a lot of people on the way out the door. People join a company, but they quit a boss.
Yeah.
We talk about the importance of company culture. It's all great, it's important, and you got to have it, but it's all mediated by a person's supervisor, and having the right kind of relationships are just crucial. And again, it's these small things, just having I think a lot of managers can read a lot of books, and you talk about various management systems and so forth, and it's easy to underestimate the power of just those small contacts, just letting using somebody's name. I always say, really the three most important. I didn't put it in this book, but I'm taking notes on another one, and I've really come to believe that the most important tools that any manager has is not their ability to give a raise, but it's using a person's name, saying thank you, and saying good job. Uh, those are so powerful, and it's easy to underestimate them. And I think managers can so easily lose sight of how crucial those things are. They're so simple, but they're so indispensable. They go a long way, especially in times like this. Just letting somebody know that, hey, the boss knows I'm here, appreciates what I'm doing, and I have reason to think I can trust this person.
Yeah, I think, Barry, I think that's critical. At our CEO retreat days, we do best ideas that we've heard through the day, and a lot of times, we'll have a whole list of pages of best ideas that's been shared. And I think you just said one that I think is really critical. So I want to recapture it just so that everybody hears it. Using the three most important things that a leader can do: using a person's name, right?
Yeah.
Saying thank you, and saying well done, or good job.
Yes, exactly.
The words well done. Those are
Actually more grammatically correct. So yeah. Anyway.
Well, they come out of that parable, but still, good job. Hey, I appreciate the work. That your work was valuable to me. It was valuable to our company, and even if it was a small task, saying those things. Wow, how easy that is for all of us, and yet for most of us as leaders, we never do those things. It's always to the next thing. It's always trying to hit the next project. Hey, real quick, I'm curious because you talked about exit interviews, and I think that that's really critical as well. I know companies sometimes, and even my company, struggled with, we always would have exit interviews, but people didn't always tell us the truth. Because they didn't want to, bring all the things out. Do you find having a third party doing those exit interviews is most helpful, or how do you get people to be really authentic when they leave, because we really want to find out the answer of what's happening?
I'll tell you, this is the thing. One of the things about writing a book like I wrote is that something else comes up, and I would think, oh, why didn't I put this in the book? And so, I should have had something on exit interviews, and I didn't. But anyway, so I need to do a second edition. But anyway, I really think the most effective tool you can use, it should not be the person's direct manager, first of all. So, because they're not going to, because again, I've just heard too many times where employees leave because of their boss. So they're not going to open up and give the real story on that. But what I do think is the most important kind of technique is, you got to kind of give a little bit to get a little bit. So this is a really challenging thing to do. But if you can, as the interviewer, offer up something, relatively innocuous, but what you find is a criticism of the organization. I have found, you can't go out and say, well, I think the president of the company is, running the place into the ground or something like that. Don't go there. But if you can find something, like we say, I've just always thought we've never did this very well, or this has been something personally, it's always bothered me. And again, not somebody's taking a swipe at some individual, but if you can share with that person something you find, less than stellar, I found that to be the single most effective kind of icebreaker. Again, you got to kind of give a little bit to get a little bit, So, but picking something that doesn't turn into a gossip thing, the HR guy says, this is horrible about, he hates this. He told me, it goes a lot. But if you can find that, again, that sort of relatively innocuous thing, that just, invites that person to go ahead and open up and say something less than complimentary. I found that to be the best way to do it. And it takes a little while to, a 15-minute set aside, time for an exit interview. It's probably not going to get you very much. It's only the last couple minutes. It takes 20, 30 minutes, frankly, a lot of times for somebody to really open up, especially if they're a notch or two, if you will, below you on the org chart. They're not comfortable talking to, people that quote unquote high up anyway. So you got to kind of, establish that relationship and break some of that down. And it's, they'll throw out one or two other things, but it takes a bit to get to the point where they tell you what the real issue is. So.
No, I think that's good. I had the habit of taking whoever was leaving for lunch out to lunch,
Oh,
because I felt like over food, and it was a little bit more relaxed. It was my way of saying thank you for working with the company. If I was their direct manager, then usually I'd send out another one of the executive team members to lunch with them, right? And we
yeah.
would still call it an exit interview. We'd say, hey, we're thankful for your work that you've been here, whether you've been here for 1 day or 10 years or whatever it might be. We want to buy you lunch on the way out. We have a couple questions that we'd ask you. And, one of the things that I challenged myself and our team to think about was practicing kind of that golden rule thinking of what is the other person feeling and thinking, and how would I want to be treated in this moment? And so I always would come up with a couple things that I said, well, here's what hey, Barry, if you're leaving, as I've thought through your work with us, these were probably a couple of the biggest frustrations or disappointments you had, right? You didn't get promoted fast enough, or you didn't get paid your wage, or you were working on projects that you weren't happy about. And I really tried to consider where they were at. And then I would say, is that true? Am I on it? Or were there other bigger frustrations that you have, or did I miss something? And just by me thinking a little bit about where they were, they had a tendency to open up. But, there's still always that hesitation. So they have to believe that, hey, this really, because, we've been taught don't burn bridges, right? And so.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where people, you can say something like, it's easy to say with somebody you don't know very well, or 4 or 5 minutes into it, hey, we're just really we're looking for your feedback because we want to do better. We want to make sure this the next time, but that's, anybody is going to feel like, yeah, how far do I put my foot in that water? So you got to know it's safe. And it takes some work. I love the idea though of just kind of trying to speculate some of where you thought somebody might have been wrong. If you put that, put yourself in their shoes. And of course you got to be careful there too, right? Like you can't say, well, I know you work for so-and-so and everybody thinks he's an idiot, so is it him? Right? You can't go there. But
well, you can say though that, hey, this is a difficult, there's different leaders, right? And to your point, I think another one of your best ideas, and I swear by it, I think the manager is often more important than the job, the task, the projects, or even the company itself, right? I've told every one of my older kids, I've got two 20-somethings, and I've told I've told probably hundreds of people, thousands of people, that especially as they start in their career work in our next level leader program, the person that they work for is going to be far more important than anything else. So forget about the job, forget about the company, pick the supervisor, pick your manager, right? And that's so critical. Can you just talk real quick about that? And then I've got some questions that have been people wanted me to ask you. So,
no, that's awesome advice. I love that because I think anybody. It's very interesting. By the way, I did I have a program on developing employees. And when I started doing it, I would ask the group, so we would kind of talk about, so how'd you get here? And you did a great job as an individual contributor. And then one day boss calls you in and shakes your hand and says, hey, congratulations, you're now a manager, right? And that's kind of, it kind of goes that way. And I would ask people, what was an impact? What did you learn from your previous boss that helped you get where you are? And what really shocked me when I started doing the first 5 or 6 times I did that is the overwhelming majority of responses were about mistakes. What I learned from this guy is don't be an idiot like he was, or don't treat people the way that guy treated me once in my life. And I came to, over time, I would wrap up that program, the last thing I would talk about, I put a slide up. I didn't use slides all the way through, but I would throw a slide up at that one, and it was a silhouette. And the caption would read something like, I had this boss one time who, and then like an ellipsis, and the point being that, just as everybody here, remember that boss that had an impact. You're going to be that story for somebody that works for you. And we ought to all think about, what do we want somebody to say when that's your ex-employee
Wow.
talking about you on this thing? What do you want them to say? And I was really, getting to that point really crystallized for me. The point that you're making right there is that, so our careers are just so much bound up with what we see and what we learn, for better and worse, by people we've worked for. And I got to tell you, Ken, I love that thought about, trying to encourage people early in career, seek out the right kind of person you'd like to work for, because it is so true. I mean, the level of, I would hear these stories in that program, and you could sometimes hear the visceral reactions people had from, usually not so good, frankly, but you hear that on people, and how deeply leaders do affect people. So if we know that at the start of our careers, might as well try to get somebody that's going to affect us that deeply in a positive way, right? So that's a great point.
Well, and as business owners and CEOs as well, we've got to think through, I think from a stewardship perspective, we all are on a journey, a leadership journey, and hopefully we're better today than we were a year ago or a couple of years ago. But it's still important to think about, am I the kind of leader that other people want to follow? Am I the kind of leader and what is my biggest leadership gaps? That's one of the questions that I think is really critical, that we should ask ourselves every year, is to say, well, where am I not the kind of leader that my people would want to be under? Right. And again, it's not that we're going to be perfect. Every one of us has flaws. Every one of us has errors that, it's a lifetime to improve. But I always believe that self-awareness precedes self-improvement. So I've got to sit down and say, okay, as a leader, where do I need to get better so that my team will want to follow me? Hey, a question that I got, and anybody that's on the call, we're going to be taking questions in just a couple minutes. You can put them in the chat box. You can send them to me directly, or if you raise your hand, I'll take you off mute and you can ask Barry yourself. We want to welcome you into the conversation that we're having, this dynamic conversation about human resources. One of the things that some people ask me, especially for some smaller businesses, HR, unfortunately, sometimes is often a later thought when people are forming companies. So they're thinking about products, they're thinking about, who do I need to hire, even from, from a staffing perspective. Obviously, they're thinking about marketing and sales. And so they might get to a place where, they've been in business for a while and they don't necessarily have HR policies or programs or so on and so forth. What would you encourage, or where would you encourage? One of the questions I had that was given to me is there a place to start? Or, and your book, I think, does a great job of this, but can you outline maybe for a business that's been existing, how do they go back and start to rebuild that HR program? And what policies should they have in place?
I'm gonna, I guess I'll answer this in a way that's, it's not very kind in a certain way, but you asked, so I guess you're looking for an honest answer. I'll put it this way, I've been a director of HR, VP level for, I don't know, 20 plus ish, 25 years or so before I started doing my own thing. And one of the reasons I wanted to go on my own is because I came to realize that there are a lot of things, I guess in keeping with my book, but things that you learn at a certain level that you realize, smaller businesses could really benefit from a lot of this. And so that was kind of a lot of the impetus for me to want to start my own consulting business. And I have to say, when I got out on my own, and the biggest surprise that I had from people who, and people also in many cases that I knew for a lot of years in my network, who would maybe be a service provider to HR or something like that. These people would, and I continue to hear it, by the way, is I think that for a lot of, I guess you could say, more junior level HR people, there's a lot of contempt that a lot of business people have. And I really think that's the word for it. Again, it's not kind. And I was really surprised to encounter it so much. But there's a lot of contempt for more junior level human resources people. And I have to say, on a lot of reflection, and then maybe some companies I've worked with that have HR people, I think a lot of that's relatively fairly deserved. No, I think we have a lot of schools that are, and I hope I'm not offending somebody, by the way, but I just, you asked. So, and I don't like saying it, but, I think our bachelor's level programs are not turning out, sort of administrative level people. And to the extent that they're talking about more serious substantive issues like we're talking about here in terms of leadership, I don't think they're really packaging the content or presenting it in a way that is really causing these people to want to or see the need to transfer what they're learning and out into the workplace. Or maybe there isn't the opportunity, I don't know, but it doesn't seem to be resonating to the extent it's there in a program. And I think that the other reality is, I come into businesses of maybe in some cases, 30 or 50 or 100 people, or sometimes, unfortunately, 200 or so. And you kind of look under the hood at certain practices. And, it's not just a question of saying it's sloppy, but it's based on things that are, this HR person giving a certain amount of guidance that isn't true. And it's not needed, or they'll say, well, we have to get to, we have to treat everybody the same because otherwise we're going to get, somebody's going to hit us with a discrimination lawsuit or something like that. No, that's not really exactly necessary or really the way you should think about this. But so, I guess I would say to that business that's looking at, to your point, Ken, I guess I just offer that as some background here. I think if your point is like we got a lot of kind of ragged administrative procedures and we need to clean that up for our 50 employees or something like that, you probably ought to get a person. I don't know, probably don't need to pay more than 60 grand a year for, and a couple of years at this or something like that, and that's fine. But if you are looking for somebody who's going to be a resource for your managers, that, hey, I got this guy and he's my best guy, but he's, I think he might be smoking pot, or I think that he's not treating everybody else well, and how do we deal with that? And if it's causing your more experienced managers problems that they can't solve on their own, I'm sorry to put it this way, but I don't think those are issues you should be taking to your brand new, relatively junior human resources person. I just don't think that person's going to give you the kind of a guidance that you need, and a lot of times it's people. I would say, go call a lawyer, and I don't mean to, I'm not trying to be mean or sound like I'm just advertising or something on your face here, but I think there are a lot of questions along those kinds of lines of problems that a lot of companies call them attorneys for. That the attorney can. They're looking at this in terms of how do I inoculate the company from any potential, or insulate them from any potential legal issues, and that's all important. But there are the vast majority of them are things that come back to I think are able to be addressed a lot of ways, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, Ken, in terms of just well, let's sort out what really are the right expectations here, and let's not beat somebody up over it. Let's give them a chance to succeed. Tell them what the issue is. Give them an opportunity to correct it. Let them know what happens if they don't. Let them know what happens if they do. Which is how we'd all want to be treated, right? I mean, if it was me, that's what I'd want. But being able to do that in ways that is clear, making sure we're holding the employee accountable where they should be, we're holding management accountable where they should be, and focus on those kinds of things, and we can probably pretty well keep the lawyers out, But I think, I'm sorry to say it, but that's just not the kind of experience I think that a lot of junior level people have. So, if you're trying to get that, again, if going back to your question, if you're trying to kind of catch up with that, your administrative level HR person, somebody you can probably afford, if you will, a 50 grand a yearish or so person, that's the kind of stuff they can set you up with, and they'll get the procedures generally correct and do the administration and so forth. But for the more, the more value added aspects of, hey, how do you help me help my people become more successful? I don't think that's the person that can help you. So.
I agree, actually. And I think that, one of the things, and part of the reason I wanted to have you on today is I just find that so many companies struggle in this area of HR, and again, it becomes a secondary. Sometimes they don't think, I can get good people and I can put them in place. But, people are complicated, and this is our most valuable resource as companies and organizations. I mean, you're seeing it now with the PPP program. Most companies spend somewhere around 80% of their revenue or 80% of their cost on payroll.
That's right.
and, but all of a sudden you've got real people with real issues, and sometimes they're very unique, right? And they come into your company, and you've been in business for 15 years or 20 years or 30 years, and all of a sudden you have a brand new issue that you've never seen before, and you kind of talked about it maybe or thought about it, but you kind of need that extra little help through that particular moment. And a policy is going to be okay, or some information, but it's more of a strategy conversation than anything.
Yeah.
And you need somebody that can help think from a strategic point of view. Now, I will say this real quick on policy, and let me show my hand here real quick, and then I've got several questions already being asked of me, which I'm not surprised. I say to companies, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, and I could be, but I say, hey, listen, at least just think through some critical processes in your company. So think about, how do you handle sick leave? How do you handle days off? How do you handle work from home or telework? How do you handle some of these things? How do you handle a complaint? And if you at least have some processes in place, whether they're the best processes or not, you at least have a framework that you can go back to and be able to talk to people about and say, here's our process, whether it's the right process or the wrong process. As long as I've documented something, it can raise a sense of, hey, we've at least thought through this issue a little bit. So, I just, and I'll just real quick a story on this. So I was working with a company one time, and they were having an employee issue, right? And so the CEO calls me up and he says, hey, Ken, I'm having this issue. This employee wants this and wants that or whatever. And I said, well, what's your employee handbook say? And what if, do you have anything referenced in any shape or form? And he says, well, I haven't looked at the employee handbook in 15 years. I said,
okay.
I said, well, and I mean, this is true. I said, well, you had them sign it when they came in. Yeah, oh yeah, we have every employee send the handbook, when they come in. But I mean, here's the CEO that hasn't paid attention to anything that's in the handbook in the last 15 years. And so, so anyway, I ended up getting his handbook. I said, well, can I get a handbook? And he said, well, let me, I think I can get you one. And so anyway, and I went page by page through the handbook, and it was pretty good, right? I mean, it had a lot of good information that was there. They just weren't utilizing it. They weren't applying it. And it should be, I think it should be our number one go. I mean, not that the handbook is everything, but, do we have any documentation on it, right?
Yes.
Hey, Denise asked a question. Hey, Denise, I'm going to take you off mute so that you can ask your question to Barry.
Can I I'm sorry, before Denise, if I could just dump it, just one comment I would like to make, if I could, Ken. I will tell you, the whole issue of employment law is becoming, we all want to say, hey, if we just have a few common sense things and everybody's trying to do the right thing, we're going to be good. You know what? Unfortunately, not anymore. That might have been true, like maybe Ken, when you started a business, when I did, but you know, the employment law is just proliferating so much. And in the last several years, one of the things we're seeing now is municipalities getting into it. It was bad enough we had state and federal. Now we've got, you know, municipalities getting into the act. And, you know, if you are a multi-site, multi-state employer, I'll tell you what, I work with several clients on this stuff, and you know, it makes my head spin, and I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I mean, don't minimize. I mean, Ken's talking about this. I mean, really, if you're one of those thinking, yeah, well, I haven't looked at ours, but we haven't really had a problem. Yeah, past performance is no guarantee of future. So, I mean, really, in this day and age, you have to look at that more than you ever did. So, sorry on that.
No, I agree. And your whole point about the local municipalities getting involved too, you know, it's different now, right? Because the larger our businesses, and even this whole remote workspace. I mean, if I'm in Maryland or Pennsylvania and I've got an employee in Salt Lake City, right? And
yes,
they may have different rules and regulations there.
Yes.
And I need to be aware of what their rules
Exactly.
and regulations are, so that I'm not putting on something that, you know, here that may be okay, that may not be okay in a different state. So
That's right.
I think that point is very valid, which is why, you know, getting the wisdom of others is important. Hey, Denise, you had a quick question, important question.
My question is, do you believe that employee engagement belongs under the HR umbrella?
No. I think HR needs to support it. So, you know, we were talking earlier here about, you know, leadership. And I think, you know, the one thing, I have it somewhere in my book, but I should have really called it out more prominently than I did. You know, I think the most important lesson I learned in being part of management teams and all that stuff is that, you know, everything comes down to leadership. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it all begins and ends with leadership. And so when we think about, you know, where that, again, you know, people join the company, but they quit a boss. Mm-hmm. So the only way you get to employee, you know, engaged employees is through a leader. Now, let's be clear about one thing here. You know, the word gets thrown around a lot. And, you know, when we talk about an employee engagement, we're not talking about happy employees, okay? So it really isn't about getting people to just feel happy about, you know, liking the boss or liking the company. And one of the reasons that people struggle with this is because they think one of the keys to employee engagement is things like, you know, buying everybody ice cream on Fridays or something like that. Nobody joined the company because they want ice cream on Friday or because they get their laundry, you know, the dry cleaning done, or it's a great company picnic or something like that. You know, I tell you, this is, again, you may find this surprising coming from an HR guy, but the real key to creating engaged employees, I think, comes down to this. You know, one of the observations I had somewhere on the line is that, you know, at the end of the day, everybody wants to play on a winning team. People want to win. They want to. They don't care about, you know, given the choice between, again, ice cream on Fridays and really cool company T-shirts, and boss puts on a just crazy wild Christmas party every year, or whatever, and it's a blast and all that kind of stuff. Look, people join a company and stay with the company and give their best, what we call the discretionary effort, which is what you're shooting for in employee engagement, by the way. You want people to contribute in ways that they don't have to keep the job or because somebody's looking over their shoulder. So when people are doing that, that's what you're trying to get at in engagement. What makes people do that? When they're winning, when they're on a team that wins. So if you want to create employee engagement, I just say I've been part of it enough, watched it work and not, and so forth. If you make widgets for you know, what your company does, make awesome widgets. take off the heads of your competitors, just be really successful. Not, like they say, somebody once said, nothing succeeds like success. Build a great company. Be so passionate about what you do and what you're about, and make sure everybody knows that. And everybody's got a level of accountability towards it. And they see that I put in the effort, we have the results, and it feels good to win. And it feels good to be part of a team that wins. That's employee engagement. And that's got to start with the leadership of the business. And it goes back to, again, it's not a question of, ice cream on Friday. It's a question of what are we really here to do? And how do we really get everybody as part of the team being able to contribute to the success? Now that side of it is where the HR department can come in, because it does come back to things like, do we have performance appraisals that really, really, truly, if you will, judge people on how well they're contributing to what really matters in the business? Do we know what that is? Do the leaders in the business know it? And are we communicating it all the way down through the business? And that's not just a question of a company newsletter, but it's the kind of thing that's built into the systems in the business, the people systems. Things like how we appraise people. How do managers talk about people, and how do they not talk about people? What are the bases on which we're using which we're giving people raises? My book I'm working on right now is about pay for performance models. And, it's oftentimes a very obscure sort of part of a business. It should be the most transparent thing in the world. Because it's the number one question everybody wants, asks. They don't ask it of anybody, but anytime somebody starts a job, the real question anybody has is, what do I got to do to get a raise around here? Right. So everybody should be able to get that answer, right? That's what we all want, but nobody asks it because you're not going to get a real answer. And but if you've got a real process that's reliable, that's as reliable as how you make your widget or deliver your services, that you can put in front of somebody saying, here are the nuts and bolts. Here's what we want. Here's how you deliver it. And if you do that, here's what you get for it. So HR should have those kinds of tools. One of the other things, by the way, while I'm at it, is, when I say about managers being the most frustrating people that I usually work with, is because, the HR people are often thought of as like, the touchy-feely ones, and, oh, let's just be nice to everybody. And the managers want to say, oh, if it wasn't for HR, they, I can't do this or that because of some stupid law or whatever, but boy, I'd like to clean up. Well, I'll tell you what, I've had so many conversations with managers about one of their problem children. And they're saying, well, we're not sure about this or that. And I'm the one saying, look, this guy, you've got goals from the COO. You're not going to be able to deliver. You've got a key guy here who's one of your bottlenecks. Let's address this. Let's get a performance improvement plan. If he fixes it, awesome. Otherwise, you got to get him out. But that's part of the thing about engagement, I think, as it should be, in the sense of, does it matter? Does it not? Because that's what it is to build a winning team, right? It goes back to, I think everybody here will, remember, we go back to, we think of it as being, our Lord wants us all to be, to treat everybody nice. Well, 2 Thessalonians, Paul was addressing the fact that there's the community there that, he's hearing that there are some of the members of the community that aren't pulling the weight. And what does he say? Does he say, well, you got to be nice to everybody? He says, hey, here's what we say. If they don't work, they don't eat. And that's, by the way, we can say, well, that's mean, or he's a tough guy. Look, I think what Paul is recognizing is that part of human dignity that Christ gives us means that we have the capability and the obligation to contribute. And I think anybody in a leadership role accepts that. And they see that as part of really, I think, whether we are cognizant of this or not, consciously so, but we see this as a fundamental part of human dignity, because I got a job to do. Well, I'm a parent. I got to take care of my family and so forth. I got to be part of my community, because this is what I'm called to. And this is part of my human dignity. Well, you know what? Your employees have that too. And it's not bad. As a matter of fact, it really is a kind of ministry to call employees back to that, to say that, hey, you're part of the team. We need you to do what you got to do, just like I got to do what I got to do, and the boss has got to do what he's got to do. We need you to do the same thing.
Right.
And that's how you win. and that's how, again, this is how I've come to believe this very passionately over the years. In case you couldn't tell, but this is how this is part of how we, as leaders, fulfill our Christian mission.
Right. I like the
Yes.
passion, Barry. I think it's fantastic. I can see that we've hit on a nerve, which I think is great. And I think we need people that are passionate about the human resource side. And, you know, I'll just share real quick, and then I got a real couple quick questions,
Sure.
and Daniel's going to follow up on a question about, you know, the employees in different places. You know, I think there was a real light bulb for me when I saw myself from rather than the owner of the business to the steward of a business. And what happened before is I'd put up with a bad employee for a while, right? I knew that they were underperforming, and maybe I needed them to fulfill that role. And I just said, well, I need somebody at the helm in that area. And I would tolerate their poor performance at times, and I would try to help them a little bit, or I'd encourage them, or I'd give them some tools or whatever that I thought might be helping. And then all of a sudden, when God really convicted me on that stewardship perspective, and I said, you know, I'm not really the owner of this business. God's the owner of it. And my job is to steward it well. And I need to steward all the resources of the business. So whether it's a product, I need to make sure that it's built well, or whether it's, you know, finances, I need to manage that well. But people, I need to make sure that they're using their gifts and talents and their abilities. And if God's given them 100% capacity, you know, with their gifts and talents, whatever that 100% is for them, and I'm tolerating 25%, or I'm tolerating 50%. Why I wouldn't tolerate a copy machine in our office if it was only working 50%. I mean, you get the idea. I mean, that was kind of that light bulb moment to me, right?
Yeah.
And I said, hey, it's my job now to go and have a conversation with them to either figure out, do they need to be under a different manager? Do they need to be doing different work, or do they need to separate to go to someplace else?
Yes.
And it's not because I'm sad about their work. It's not, or that I feel like I'm frustrated that it's that I have a desire to help them reach their highest level of capacity.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to be in a place that they're not going to be engaged, that they're not going to be excited about the work that they're doing, or that they're doing it in an efficient and effective way. So I really like what you're saying. And it really was a ministry moment for me, because I thought I was doing ministry by just kind of carrying them along and giving them a paycheck. But there wasn't that dignity, right? So, hey, listen, I want to go back because I know we're almost out of time. We've only got a few minutes left. Danielle, I'm going to take you off mute so that you had a question to follow up from before about the conversation about being in different places. Can you want to ask Barry your question?
So actually, it's a clarifying question to what you asked. I don't even know how long ago now, but if I understood your question correctly, it was for smaller organizations where to start. And so it appears as though, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I've heard was Barry is saying a lot of the younger or newly entrances, you know, those that have just entered into that marketplace may not necessarily have the skill sets that we need to address some of the HR related concerns as it pertains to laws. But at the same time, if I heard correctly, Ken, you mentioning the fact that but there needs to be something in place, and a big challenge for us has really been that there was nothing in place, right? So just so I'm hearing correctly, it sounds as if there's two parts to this. Get something in place, revisit it frequently, so we're not like the leader that, you know, waited 15 years and hadn't reviewed the actual employee handbook or, you know, some policies. But then at the same time, Barry is saying, make sure that you are aware that whatever you put together, that it also takes into consideration your municipalities as well as the federal and state laws. Is that correct? Okay, so
Nicely done, Danielle.
So the action step is put something together, and then, you know, engage some others to help review it, modify it, and edit it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's getting, it's getting more complicated all the time. And the consequences of not doing it are getting harder and harder to, less and less tolerable for businesses, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You go, Barry.
I was going to say, so please go ahead. I mean, please, by all means, that person that if you got to get an HR administrative level person in because you need to, make sure your I-9s are done and that your, the files are set up appropriately and that kind of stuff. Yep, that's the kind of stuff that person can do. But again, if you want to say like, how do I pay people more appropriately, or I'm not sure that I've got the duties for the jobs really spelled out the way we should be, or I got a problem with this manager, I don't know what to do. I just don't think that person's probably going to be able to give you the. And I'll just one tiny little anecdote around that. But I had a call from a person, a client of mine who had an HR administrative level person, and a manager had said she was calling me because a manager had said, well, we kind of smelled something on a guy's breath and thought he might be using. Under the influence of something. She said, so what I thought we'd do is we would just bring him in and make sure he understands the drug and alcohol policy. Would you say that's right? And I said, well, how do you know that's even what he's done? You smell something on his breath. You don't want to go, what if it's patchouli? I've had that happen before. I thought it was marijuana. Whoops. Again, that's the kind of the bloody nose stuff you learn over the years that goes into my book. But, the only thing you have to start with asking, what do you know for sure? What do you know for sure? As a manager said he smelled something funny on the guy. Okay, that doesn't mean he's using drugs, and you don't want to just start with that. So it's those kinds of issues that less experienced HR people can trip over, and that kind of stuff can that can hurt. That can kind of leave a mark sometimes. So
Yeah, absolutely. Just real quick on that. What I would say for startups and even small businesses, that an employee handbook is a really important place to start, and for companies. So in that employee handbook, we should have our values and vision for the organization. I think the values are really critical, and we can hire according to values. We can reference a lot to values. And then I would say the same thing that I say from a marketing and sales perspective. I say, think through, from a sales and marketing perspective, I say, think through 10 questions your customer is asking, or you think might ask about your products or services. So, and then, answer those questions and put them on your website, social media, market that, that's your wave in the marketplace. From an HR perspective, what I say is think through 10 questions that any employee is going to ask, and put that in your employee handbook.
Yeah.
Either the process, right? How do I get a raise? How do I get promoted here? How many days off do I have? What is my time off policy? Can I go above my time off policy, right? Or can I do that? And so just being able to have some of those things in place is a place to start. Then for more complicated issues, and that really where it comes to the people issue, what I would say is you really do need to have an advisor, somebody that you can reach out to talk through some of those issues. Because it's really important. Barry is an excellent one, and even his book is a great place to start. But you can go to his website too at argoshr.com, argoshr.com, which is Argos Solutions or HR Solutions. His website. He's got some resources there that would be able to. You'd be able to have as a place to start. Hey, Barry, real quick, I know we've just got a couple of minutes left. I did get a question about places like, kind of tied to this, companies like Zenefits and some of those kind of more national HR firms. What's your take on those? And what should companies be concerned about when they bring in somebody like that?
The level of the capability of technology is really varied. Some of them have really nice solutions that are really cost effective. And some of them are just better than others. I think you got to really, really think through how you want to be able to interact with the technology before you start shopping. the other thing is that they can be very clever at hiding costs.
Yes. Yeah.
And so a lot of them will have, they'll tell you, oh, our software will do this or do that or the other thing. So ask them, okay, be sure, please ask them this. So great, so it does that. Do you support me in setting that up? Because a lot of them don't. So, and some of them are really big companies. But anyway, the other thing is that again, I hate to, I know of current clients and other companies that I've worked with who, a lot of those businesses will will offer more, I guess you might kind of call it maybe more strategic level HR services. And those are offered by people that I don't, again, I'm not trying to sound mean, but it really got no business a lot of times offering that. And one client I know, for example, a nationwide business was buying that kind of service and got audited by a federal organization and fined because those people just didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they being the third party, their HR service really, it's really amazing how much of that goes on out there. So I guess I would just be, if you want to buy those kind of services, you got to vet those people. You really got to vet those people. If you don't know the questions to ask, get somebody that does know them, because yeah, it's kind of the Wild West out there in terms of quality, caliber of the service. So.
Excellent. No, that's great advice, and you're absolutely correct. And like I said, most of the issues that we're going to deal with in many ways become HR issues because the people are the bulk of what we're dealing with in most of our companies. Hey, I know Barry would make himself available if you do have some questions, because I had several questions I could via email or on his website. You can go to contact him. Hey, Barry, we've got just about a minute or two left. We referenced it a little bit earlier, but I didn't want to end the conversation without having a little bit of a faith conversation. I know your faith is important to you. Obviously, a lot of the CEOs and business owners that we work with at CEO Experience, their faith is critical to them. How would you encourage them to allow faith to shape their company? And from an HR perspective, is there some best practices where it comes to implementing their faith in some of their HR practices? And you got about 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding.
The best you can see with that. Sure. No, it's okay. Yeah, it's good. No, we got to do what we got to do here. I think it comes down to have confidence in your ability to run a business and your passion in that. But I think in terms of dealing with people, our Lord calls us to humility. And I mean, to recognize that, we talk about Christian brothers, Christian sisters. I mean, we're not kidding. Brothers and sisters aren't any better than us, right? And I think the most successful managers, the most successful leaders, and I've been very privileged to work for people like that. And without question, what they all had in common was their humility. So I think, to just remember where it all came from and live that by your actions, that people could see that that. Like I said, I was privileged to work for two people in particular who exemplified that. So yeah, that'd be my answer in 60 seconds or less, whatever.
No, I was giving you hard. You could take it a little bit longer. I would just say on the faith perspective, and I love the idea of humility, right? That here's some things that we believe, but yet we make, I would say, humility and acceptance, that we are open to having other people in our company. And matter of fact, I think that's one of the missions that we are to have as leaders when for people to come into our companies. And so I would just say, if you want to have a prayer time and I think values are important, I think you can have those things built into your HR policies and processes. I encourage every company that I work with, as an example, to have a prayer time before work, that they open an invitation to everybody to come into. I encourage marketplace chaplains, just like sports teams have chaplains. I encourage that. You can put that as part of your wellness program in your HR policies. But the the most important aspect of it is that you're open to everyone, and that you're communicating that this is a place that every person's valued. And so if they choose to opt out of those things, or they choose to do something, raises aren't dependent upon it, it's not requirement, all those kinds of things, all that can be built into your HR policies and procedures, so that people can get to know the why behind what you do, but you just have to think through it strategically. Hey, Barry, thank you for the great conversation. Hey, do you have any last words for us, or last words of encouragement as people come back through this difficult time? What should they be doing as they bring their teams back, or what would you encourage going out from this point forward?
I would encourage you to think about, what's the plan going forward? Do people have confidence that you've thought about what the steps are? What are the challenges you're facing today? And what are you going to be facing to get yourselves back up? I think that's one of the critical ways you build engagement there. Again, when people see, here's a way forward. So
I think
that would be the most important thing, I would think.
That's fantastic. Well, I'd encourage you guys, if you have a few minutes, grab his book, The Little Black Book of Human Resource Management. It's a great read. It's funny. It's engaging, and it's very beneficial and helpful. You can also go to Barry's website. Barry, hey, thank you for doing what you do in the marketplace. It's so critical. I thank you for our friendship and our partnership.
Likewise, Ken. Thank you.
We might have to have a few more of these conversations, because there was a lot of other questions, but I appreciate your work, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
You too, Ken. Thank you so much. And I appreciate yours too. God bless.
Thank you very much. Hey guys, have a great
Bye, everybody.
week. I'll be talking to each of you soon.